At the very outset, I'd like to make apologies for the weather. And unfortunately, our plans of hosting this icon in front of our iconic clubhouse unfortunately fell through. But instead of that, I think what we decided was it would be appropriate for chess being an indoor game essentially to transfer it from the outdoor location that we had to an indoor location. But at the outset, I'd like to say it's an honor and a privilege to have Grandmaster Viswanathan Anand with us, and what better way to have an icon like him on our 125th anniversary celebrations. Grandmaster Anand is an icon and has a number of firsts to his name. He's the first Indian Grandmaster. He's won the first Asian and the first Indian to win the World Championships not once but 5 times. And along with that, he's also the first recipient of the Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna Award and also the first recipient of the Padma Vibhushan. That's the second highest civilian award. So I'd like you to put your hands together for Viswanathan Anand. Along with that, I'd also like to welcome our very own Dibendu Barua. He's a Grandmaster, and his contribution to chess nationally and internationally is second to none. In fact, he's now devoted himself to promoting the game at both the state and national level, and all youngsters and serious chess players look up to him as a guiding light. And it's indeed an honor to have both these grandmasters dueling it out on stage. And to have them in conversation, we have Jeet Banerjee. And before I end, I'd also like to thank the Kolkata Literary Meet for bringing this iconic event to Tolly, and I wish the event all success. So without any further ado, I hand the mic over to Viswanathan Anand, Dibendu Barua and Jeet Banerjee. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. We'll do a little reveal of the cover. GM Barua, Jeet and GM Anand, if you can please come up on stage. The book is available for sale should you wish to get your copy signed. But before that, once our photographer friends are done, we would request GM Barua to please say very few words. GM Barua. GM Barua just wishes...
I've personally gone through the book and read it, and there's so much in it that there's only some parts that we can cover in the next half an hour or so before we throw it open to the audience for questions. I'll start with a little bit about Anand, the man. Anand starting his early chess career. You've talked about your mother really being a great influence and starting you on this game, and your early days and your early lessons at the Tal Club in Chennai. There's one part here that you did mention where you said that you played her once in a game, and I'll just read out. I mean, you said, "I was a much stronger player than her. I lost. We never sat across a board to play each other after that, though we did continue to discuss chess, and she traveled with me for more tournaments." Would you like to tell us a little bit more, because your mother has played a big role in your life. She comes up often in the book, and why you never played another game with her?
So I was already a sort of top junior at that time. It was on a holiday when we were in Shimla, and it started a hailstorm outside. So we abandoned our plans and we sat in the hotel, and somehow we started playing a chess game. And I had seen a very artificial setup in some book. For those of you know, it involves G3, H4, Bishop H3, some crappy line. But I felt cocky enough to try this against my mother. Because, like I said, I was already a very strong junior, and my mother is someone who probably could have been strong, but she never played a competitive game. She never played in a chess club or anything. She simply didn't have the time. So, so we played a game, and then, to my surprise, my position got pretty bad, and I couldn't rescue it at all. So I was quite embarrassed to lose that game. But we discussed chess quite often afterwards. At least there is one famous photo of me playing with my mother in the swing, and I recognized the position from the photo, which is I'm showing what was then a big novelty in the Queen's Gambit. So we discussed chess for a long time. Even in recent years, my mother would sort of follow my games on the internet, and when that didn't work, my nephew or my sister would, or Aruna would keep posting up with updates during the game and so on. So she liked to follow till the very end, and a lot of the advice she gave me turned out to be very useful. That's something I'm grateful for. The most important thing which you'll see in the book is, in fact, the advice to record my thoughts. Of course, she meant principally in a chess sense, which is to write down what is it I thought of playing, what I discovered after the game, so chess analysis. But eventually it's expanded to, I started this habit of writing things typically after a defeat, but sometimes after a win. I would write down my impressions and try to think, what are the things that I did today, and did any of them have a reason or play a part in my defeat, that sort of thing. And this was very useful when recalling, when trying to write the book as well. In fact, 2 days ago, I came across an old text file which had somehow been saved in one USB stick but not in another, and it was just lying around. There's a lot of material there from 2011 and 12, which I was writing after some games. And suddenly you realize how much I was struggling before these games. And it's always a nice insight to have.
We'll talk. Yeah. So, I mean, his chess pursuits are something that all of us are aware of. The first Indian to be a grandmaster, the first Asian to be a world champion, and he's played a lot of world championship games. You've done it when FIDE had a unified title that was later in your career. Before that, you've played when there was a split in the world body, and you've played for the PCA, the Professional Chess Association, where you played Kasparov. Before that, you were forced to play Karpov in some very tough circumstances.
Right.
And then you've talked extensively in your book on the three kind of back-to-back world titles that you won and then defended. So there was the battle against Kramnik in 2008 in Bonn. After that, you defended against Topalov in Sofia, and finally against Gelfand in Moscow.
2012.
Would you like to take us through your journey of, because there have been World Championship games when you started out, and then till the one you defended against Gelfand. So where would you, I mean, there are many, where would you rate them, and which would, obviously the ones that you won would be would be higher up on the list. But how would you talk about the ones against Karpov and Kasparov? Because they were the two legendary Soviets when you were coming on to the world stage.
Okay, so I played my first candidates cycle in 1991. So I played against Karpov in the quarterfinals. This was a heavy pairing because he was the top seed in the candidates, and in my very first candidates, I had to play him in the second round. So I played against Drev, and right away in the quarterfinals, I was facing Karpov, which was annoying because they had changed the pairing system literally a day or two before the drawing of lots, which they conducted themselves without the participants. And I was forced to play Karpov. And it seemed to me to be an unfair pairing because I really felt that I should have gotten the other guy. But I eventually convinced myself that this was also a kind of opportunity. And that sooner or later in that cycle I would have to go past Karpov anyway, so I might as well start with it. That match, I think, is sort of a test of fire. This is the first time I played someone who was that strong. And when I started to play him, I honestly couldn't understand why he was so strong. Because I was outplaying him almost effortlessly in every game. But then I couldn't beat him at all. So every game he would wriggle out. From some horrible position, he would somehow find a way to wriggle out. He did this 5 times in that match in 8 games. Sorry, he did it 4 times. The 5th time I actually won. So out of the 5 things, I managed to actually nail him once. But the other 4 games, he escaped from dead lost positions. And he had 2 chances to win, and he won both. So I guess when I lost, I thought, okay, he must be strong, but this is ridiculous. I'm outplaying him in every game. But that is too innocent. The thing is, I was getting quite strong, and clearly I was able to play a decent game, but I realized, or it began to dawn on me that it's not so much about getting good positions as actually converting, because it was very hard to beat him. So this was not a world championship, but part of the world championship cycle. The very next cycle, the split in the chess world happened, and I played in 2 parallel cycles. I qualified to play Kasparov in 95. And this was, of course, the real thing, because in the intervening 4 years, I had more or less become second in the world. And now with this match, it's the first time I was going to play a match of 20 games. This was still when computers were very, very weak. And so what this meant was that all the work that Kasparov had done in 84, 85, 86, 87, 90, 93 for his match, he could still use in our match. So I was fighting against a huge library, if you like. Nowadays, it doesn't matter anymore, because all the previous matches I have, I can collect all the work I've done. But the opponent's team can generate the same work in 1/5 the time with good computers. And so this idea that you could store all this knowledge and use it later is gone. Now the trend is everything is much more short-lived. Any advantage you have, anything you have is short-lived. And it's only the basic impressions, the understanding you have that carries over. So that was my second big match. And then I had a sort of an accidental match with Karpov, where I played a qualification tournament. And then he played the final against me. So he was seeded directly into the final. And the logic was that FIDE felt that I had to convince him to play that cycle at all. And they wanted to offer him a very attractive condition to do it. I felt then that he would have played it anyway, and they didn't need to, in effect, bribe him to do it. But so what happened was we were playing in Groningen in December. Some of you, if you're chess players, will know that this is a frozen city in December. So the whole of December we're sitting and playing this incredibly tough knockout. And Karpov was sitting in a swimming pool in Las Palmas and waiting for the opponent he was going to play. To make matters worse, in a knockout tournament, obviously you can leave at any time, but we still, for superstition, we booked and guaranteed the payment for the entire stay, and luckily we did stay till the end. But then we had to go to Lausanne from Amsterdam airport, and it turned out that we asked FIDE, so have you booked a room and can I assume the room? Can we discuss about the rooms for my seconds? He said, no, we haven't booked anything for you, because we didn't know who was going to come. And this was again incredibly irritating. So I remember Aruna being incredibly angry about it, and she asked FIDE, but you knew there was going to be a human being who was going to qualify to play Karpov. Couldn't you have booked a room in FIDE's name and then filled the name when the qualifier became known? And he said something like, oh, just come there and we'll play it by ear. Anyway, that was the first time I played in a very incredibly unfair match. And subsequently, I realized and learned that Karpov had a habit of playing these so-called unfair matches because he was just very good at negotiating these conditions for himself, or he had a lot of support in the federation, which managed to get the same effect. And so for a long time, I was very angry about this, the way we were both treated. But at some point, I decided that unfair is just the way the world works, and you can't sit and complain all the time. And that if you just start, if you just turn up and try to do your best, that's probably the best thing that you can do under the circumstances. But it also made me very averse to getting into chess politics because I didn't want to support any side that had been involved in this kind of thing. In 2006, the chess world reunified again. So in order, I played the World Championship in Mexico City, which was a tournament. Then I played Kramnik in Bonn, which, as I explain in some length in the book, is the best match I've ever played and probably will ever play. Creatively, by score, by every yardstick, it was the best match I will play. And what's more, it gave this overwhelming feeling of being the best match that I played. The whole event passed off like a dream. Almost every hope we had became real, and so the best match ever. The Sofia match again became incredibly unpredictable. I was stuck in a volcano. I was stuck driving from Germany to Sofia because airspace had been shut down, and then the match had gone through many, many adventures. And finally, I would say the most difficult match that I played was against Gelfand, and I see this as part of a chess crisis that I was undergoing in that stretch.
I think it's worth talking to the audience a little more about the game that you played in Sofia and your travails on how you really reached. Normally before a world championship, you'd probably go with some days in hand, prepare. But the circumstances were such, you had your team, you all assembled in Germany, missed a flight, went via Austria, realized you may have taken a flight from Vienna. And that whole journey, I mean, it's quite gripping when you read it in the book. And then eventually when you reach Sofia and finally the hotel, you still thought you should take 2 circles of the hotel because they were watching a movie and they thought they should finish it. So I think if you tell them a little bit more about that journey and how it helped you prepare.
Okay, so what happened was on the 14th, we went from Madrid to Frankfurt because we thought the whole team will assemble in Frankfurt and then we'll fly from there to Sofia. 14th night, the first thing started to go wrong. Anyway, to add an extra touch, like a week back, my father had called me to wish me for the match. And he said, when are you going? I said, we're going on the 14th to Frankfurt and from Frankfurt to Sofia. And he said, can you go from Frankfurt to Sofia on the 14th? Because I checked the horoscope and it's a better day. So, and I said, well, I can't do this because, the team has planned this, that. Anyway, I'm going from Madrid to Frankfurt, that should count. He said, no, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So my friend, Hans Walter, who left from Frankfurt to Sofia, he left on 14th. He left one day early to go there and get things set up. He arrived in 2 hours, he went to the hotel, and he checked into all the rooms under his name so that no one else would know what the team was looking like. And he was enjoying himself. 14th night, already a friend I had in Lufthansa called me and said, maybe you should see what's happening because we've already shut down some northern airports. And apparently this Icelandic volcano had gone off, and so much of the volcanic ash was starting to collect in the atmosphere. They were not sure that planes could fly, and they were not sure that the engines wouldn't suck in too much dust and crash. So my trainer Nielsen was coming, and he said he'll take a train from Copenhagen. He'll come to Hamburg by train, and then come Hamburg to Frankfurt and join us, and we'll fly. And then he calls us at some point. He says, I can't. Sorry, he was supposed to come by plane, but he said, I can't come by plane, so I'm going to do the train ride. And he finally arrived at midnight or something in Frankfurt. Then my other trainer was supposed to come from Warsaw. He took the train and arrived late, and so on. So everyone was struggling. Surya, of course, because he was coming from India, had come a day earlier, so the two of us were in Frankfurt. Then on the 15th, we go out and look at the skies. And the skies have never been more beautiful or more blue. Just totally clear. And in fact, what they think now is that this volcanic ash was so effective in cleaning the sky, it was the best time to fly planes. Nothing happens with the dust. It's too thinly spread. And, the visibility is just, you can probably see Iceland from there. Anyway. But then my friend from Lufthansa called me and said, run to the airport and collect your bags. Because he said, if you don't do that, the airlines will shut the airport down, and then they'll start this robotic mumbling that they do, which is, no, security, 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 and you will not be able to access your bags again. So we took his tip, we ran to the airport, took all our bags out, because we had checked it through. So we took as many bags as we could out, and we came back home, and he was completely right. The next day the airport shut down, and everybody who had checked their luggage through to some final destination, the airlines are, we don't know. So he was right about that. Then we spent a day where Aruna tried to convince me that we should take a bus and go. And I kept saying, but in one day, if the weather clears, we can take the flight. Whereas the car journey is going to take so long. So we waited 2 days. And then finally we decided we couldn't keep on waiting. We'd have to make a move. So on the 17th, we left from Frankfurt. Now the normal route would be Germany to Serbia and then cross the border to Bulgaria. But we had to do Germany, Austria, Hungary, Romania, and then Bulgaria because Surya and me and Aruna didn't have Serbian visas. So off we go, and we stayed for the night in Budapest. And in fact, we even had time. Judith Polgar came over to visit us in the morning. So on, we drove to Sofia. I mean, I'll probably take up the whole thing if I go into the details, but at some point we got to the border crossing, which between Romania and Bulgaria, which is a river, and we were worried that the bridges would be closed. But in fact, there was a barge which kept operating. So our bus loaded, our minivan, if you like, got loaded onto the barge and got pushed out on the other side. And then we drove quite fast to Sofia. The traffic police stopped us because we were speeding. And then he said, oh, I know, you're the chess player who's trying to, go. So, and of course, when we got on in Frankfurt, we told ourselves, well, this is unfortunate, but we must sit and work during this bus journey so that we don't waste a lot of time, and we're going to be disciplined and we're going to be motivated and work and all. And we tried, and the thing is shaking, and the computer is shaking, and the pieces are shaking, and you can't do any serious work. So after 1 hour, we abandoned this plan, and we started watching Lord of the Rings extended version. And when we finally arrive in Sofia, we realized there's like 15 minutes left in the movie. So literally the final stage where they're reaching Mount Doom and they're going to drop the ring in. And the driver understood our predicament, and he said, if you like, I can just drive around the hotel till you finish the movie, because, you can't be expected to go up now. So we did that. We got there at 4 in the morning, and we're going around the hotel parking lot till we finish the movie, and then we say, okay, you can stop, and then we stop and go in. Luckily, Aruna, by a lot of legal maneuvering and threatening FIDE with force majeure, the force majeure part of the contract, she managed to negotiate that they would push the starting day by one day, which gave us a little time to recover. But normally we were planning to arrive on the 15th and start on the 23rd. And we arrived 20th morning and started on the 24th. So, and then I lost the very first game by reversing the order of my moves. And then I was lost in the second game because again I reversed the order of my moves. And my seconds were starting to worry. It's not enough if we prepare him a good line. We have to make sure he remembers it. But anyway, the rest you can read in the book, but it was a fun match.
Before we move away from these World Championships, you also mentioned that, you played Kramnik in 2008, and then in a subsequent World Championship game, he offered you help, as a second from remote.
Right.
How does it work? There's been such intense rivalry. He could have been a world champion. He was, but then you defeated him. And then when you're playing somebody else, and you can continue your status as a world champion, and he offers you help, when sometimes sportsmen will might think that why let him go further?
Sure.
So can you tell us a bit about the psychology?
Okay, well, with Kramnik, I write in the book that I knew that this match was going to impact us. He's always someone that I've liked very much. In fact, many years earlier, he helped Kasparov against me. And I mentioned this bit that after the World Championship match, we bumped into each other in Paris, very near the Champs-Élysées. And he looked at me as if to say, sorry, but it was a very good offer, learning experience for me. I couldn't turn it down. And I said, yeah, I understand, and something like that. Sort of business means business kind of thing. And so this time especially, I felt that the match would affect our relationship for a year, because when you're rivals, you're not really friends. And you have to park those thoughts. But I knew that after some time, we would both get over it and we'd be friends again. That's how I expected it to be. He must have suffered that match because it went badly for him and it was an intense match. But I met him in the gym in Monaco in April the next year. So we played in October and thing. And I sort of awkwardly asked him, because he just had a daughter then, so I sort of tried to open up the conversation again. Asked him how his daughter was, and he spoke as if nothing had happened. And then I knew that the ice had broken and there was no big issue. So our relationship had more or less become completely okay. And that's the thing with Kramnik. I knew that he's very decent, he's very friendly, and nothing was going to happen. With Topalov, I would say even in the best of times, we were not talking very much. So I knew that that was not going to continue anyway. And the same with Gelfand, same as Kramnik with Gelfand, I knew that we would be friends. But what happened was, when I was playing in Sofia against Topalov, we had somehow arrived at a strategy of playing Kramnik's openings from his match against Topalov in 2006 in 2010. So I played the Grunfeld in one game, then I switched, and my entire white repertoire was based on Kramnik, and my replacement black opening was based on Kramnik's match. Now Kramnik and Topalov had a falling out. Some of you may know this was about, it's called Toilet Gate, so I will not elaborate now, but they had a falling out, but I don't think that was his principal reason. It couldn't have hurt, but I don't think it was his principal reason. I think Kramnik is just, he's a nice guy and he really likes chess, and he felt like doing it. It was a whim, he might not have done it again. So for instance, with Gelfand, he was much too close with Gelfand to offer that. I think he never indicated that he had done anything in Gelfand against me either, but it was clear it didn't happen. But I liked Kramnik's explanation. He called me and said, I'm flattered you're trying to copy me, but you're doing it so badly, can I help? And everyone on the team immediately started laughing, and we, of course, we were thrilled to have his help, because our openings were struggling, but we didn't know exactly why. And then he really started to point out why.
You also had a blow hot, blow cold, one gets the feeling, with the relationship with Kasparov. I mean, he's also called you to offer his advice, but perhaps when you didn't openly support his FIDE candidature, maybe he was not happy. How will you, since you first played him in a World Championship game in '95, and guess even today you may possibly bump into him, how would you describe your relationship with Garry Kasparov as a person?
Well, Gary is cut from a totally different cloth, so that much is clear. I say this with a lot of respect, but he's clearly just a very different character. I have probably gone out for dinner with Kramnik more in 2 months than I've gone out with Gary in my entire life. He was always a bit apart. And Gary and Anatoly, I mean, those two boys can hold a grudge like few others. So with them, I mean, I think we are colleagues. So I'll get to the end of the story, which has a happy ending, if you like. But for many years, we were rivals, and we were rivals. We were not friends. We would speak affectionately, but just as colleagues will do during tournaments. Whereas Kramnik has come and stayed in my house and all that sort of thing. So, though it has to be said, both of them are old. I mean, Karpov is obviously 2 decades older than me, and Kasparov is 6 years older. So, so in that match, Kasparov called, and now, funnily enough, he had called me for the Kramnik match as well. So a mutual friend, Frederick Friedel, called and said, Gary wants to talk to you. And I said, yeah, sure. And Gary spoke to me and said, you can try this against Kramnik. He's not very good at this, and you can try that, and so on. And I said, oh, thanks, sir. That's very helpful, and I'll keep that in mind. But it wasn't help in any sense of the word. It was just two people chatting, and I was hoping to get something. So, and then in Sofia, he called again, and this time his contribution was a bit more, in the sense that he would often give us some of his old analysis and thing, but it felt casual to me. It felt casual to me, and I didn't think more of it. But apparently, Gary understood it to be, and this could easily be something lost in translation or lost in communication. Gary said, I will help him in this match if he will support me in the elections. So anyway, Gary called, he was friendly, and I thought, well, okay, he's more friendly this time, but maybe he likes me more. So we misread that, and then he helped me in this match. And then a few months later, I got the phone call. So I need you to go to Malaysia to support me in this candidacy, they said. And, I didn't say no directly. Then I waited, kept on waiting, and finally and after that, he was furious. So then for about 5 years, we didn't speak. He told this mutual friend, he said, I won't shake his hand, but if he offers his hand, I'll shake it. And as all of you know, these kinds of agreements never happen. So we never shook hands during 5 years. We Never, I mean, it was quite silly almost. He would walk by and I would look this way. I'd pretend to look up, the usual nonsense. So, and then he started criticizing me at every point he could. And also, as I mentioned in the book, I began to get into a sort of chess crisis around this time. So even though I felt his criticism was fair, I was getting annoyed by it, and some of his criticism was just over the top. So, and he offered Gelfand his help in the match. Gelfand said no. And then he criticized Gelfand for not taking my help, and then he criticized me as well. And he would criticize every little thing, which didn't make any sense. And then in 2013, he was more or less available to Carlsen the full match. And in 2014 as well. So, pretty serious grudge. And I thought, okay, that's the end of that. So I will probably not talk to him again. But then in 2016, I played a tournament in St. Louis. So me, Topalov, Nakamura, and Caruana. It's not an official tournament, so it's a fun tournament, but Kasparov came to visit one day, and the sponsor Rex took us all out for dinner. So we went out for dinner. At this time, we couldn't avoid each other, and we couldn't keep looking all around, and so somehow we started talking, and we realized both of us just felt like talking. I mean, I think both of us had reached the stage where we felt that it's silly to continue like this. Also, if he likes, he had his revenge. So fine, and we could drop the matter and move on. And so after that, it was very friendly. He would greet me at the beginning of the tournament, but we were still not close in any way. Then last year, when I played in Zagreb, I lost my first round in a completely winning position against Nepomniachtchi. And then the second game, I drew a completely lost position against Carlsen. And when I finished my draw against Carlsen, almost after the full 7 hours, I came out of the tournament hall, and Kasparov came running out and said, "Oh, that is an amazing save. It's really a pity you lost yesterday." And he started, and I mean, initially I was suspicious, but I realized he had almost been rooting for me. And that whole tournament, he was praising me to the skies, though I finished in the bottom half. And he was praising me in the commentary room and so on. And but his thing seemed genuine. It really felt genuine this time. And subsequently, he's been very affectionate. He sent a video message on my 50th birthday and so on. So I think we had almost hit the stage where he felt, bygones are bygones. And this is practically the only guy still playing who can remember my chess career. You reach that stage, and that was it. So right now, our relations are excellent, and I feel very warmly, but of course we have gone through every bit of that.
Quickly, just to digress a bit from the actual play and the players, you're one player who, when you started off, you would refer to chess books. That was the only source of knowledge and data that you could get. And then you've seen the early days of computers to today where players have access to AI, artificial intelligence. How would you trace the journey? What was so difficult then or not difficult, and how would you compare it to today with the options that young players have?
Mm-hmm. So when for instance Dipu and me were growing up as juniors, preparation was just picking up a chess informant, flipping a few pages, and he used to do that, though you would never suspect it from his games. But still, preparation by today's standards was so casual and spontaneous that it's hard to compare that era to now. In those days, I like to say that countries still had individual styles. So generally, Asian countries, we were not so professional with our openings and home preparation. So our main skill was getting out of bad positions with tactical confusion. And that's how it was. And if you see, the Indonesians had a similar style. So there was this player called Ardian Shah. He would get such horrible positions and then somehow defend himself tactically. There seemed to be national styles almost because we were all isolated from each other. That tendency was strong. It was, I remember going to chess tournaments where you would suddenly, a rumor would spread through the dining room that the latest informant, chess informant, the chess book, somebody had a copy. And then everyone would go to reception and say, can you give me the room number of this player? So one year it was a player called Mark Condy from Scotland. So we all found out about this and we ran to his room. So I go to his room and I realize there's a queue outside. And I realized everyone in the tournament has had the same rumor and they're all standing. So that was one stage. Then the first computer database came. That meant that instead of carrying 15 kilos of books in your suitcase, suddenly you had one computer that you carried and one or two floppy disks, and you went to tournaments. So that was already a change, and also the fact that the information came much faster. So before, you need to remember, this guy's game, I think it's page 58 in Informant 33, and then you would look there. Now you just searched for it and the games all appeared. So the skill set is also changing, and that evolution is also constant. Then the first chess playing engine came. And that initially had the sophistication of a calculator, which means it was perfect in everything that was 2 or 3 moves long and horrible in anything beyond that because it simply didn't have the reach. Which meant that you could use it like a calculator. You would do all your sums on your own, and then you say, well, let me just check the answers quickly, and you would check that because we can still make 1 or 2 innocent mistakes, but the computer won't. And 1 in every 10 things would turn out, there'd be a tactical flaw, and you'd look at that. So that's the first time you could learn from a computer. So there's a little bit of tactical discipline coming in. Then computers started to get a bit stronger. And as they get a bit stronger, you're taking something else that you do and trying to see if you can push it to the computer and focus on something else. I would say within 4 or 5 years, you could even trust its response. You would have to come up with a good plan yourself or a good idea yourself, but then you could use the computer to game it and see if it works, and so on. So the frontier kept expanding. By 2003-04, I think there was almost nothing that we could do better than computers except long-term planning, because they were still not very good at finding any interesting plans. Then some very new programming skills came along, not yet considered AI, so I'll get to that in a second, but the effect was similar. And so there was a program called Ripka, and this one came up with such unusual long-term stuff that it began to look like it was intelligent. But that lasted for a few years. And at one point, the computers were so strong that we had almost given up. We just thought, first of all, they can't get much stronger because they're hitting some limit. And anyway, they're 400 points above us, so that's hopeless. And then at this point, the first neural network or artificial intelligence came along. What happened here is instead of people trying to program values into a computer, so what used to happen was some guy would write a chess program and he would say the rook is 5 pawns, the bishop is 3, the knight is 3. That's easy enough. But then he would write that king safety is worth so much and the space near the king is worth so much and thing. And the next time he would try a different value, he would change a small fraction or a decimal here and tweak this and that and see, and make these two versions play a million games with each other. And at the end, see if one was getting an advantage. And like this, slowly advance along. But then this new idea came that if a computer could simply learn the way a human learns, which is to simulate the environment of a brain and then let it play against itself, and don't give it any human knowledge at all. Don't show it any game that humans have played. Just let it figure it out for itself. So literally teaching it the rules and making it play with it. And apparently this was successful because this new technology then promptly started to beat the older one. That match is a bit controversial because it's still not clear that the two computers played under fair conditions. So you see, even computers have problems with fair and unfair competition. But at least the suggestions of the neural programs are so different that you can see that this is something really different and worth looking. And at each stage, things have changed. So now, when I was young, if you were born in, I don't know, Nauru, then let's say on Sunday you accidentally met someone or you found out that there's a game called chess. You'll go around Monday and Tuesday around your island and try to find a library that maybe has a chess book. Wednesday and Thursday you look for someone to play against. And Friday your chess career is over without ever having started. I'm exaggerating, but generally they used to say that if you were born in Moscow, you started with 100 ELO points. So what has happened now is the same person is born on the specific island. So on Sunday he hears about a game called chess. Sunday evening he logs on and he learns the rules. And Monday he looks for material, finds an online chess club. Monday evening he's playing against players across the island. 3 weeks later he begins to understand something. Then he hires a chess coach on Skype. And 2 months later he's able to play. It's still better to be born in Moscow or nowadays in Calcutta or Chennai, but it's not the hopeless barrier it used to be. And the second thing is you have access to the same, if you have a computer and you can download the same software, you have access to the strongest coach in the world who's sitting in your house 24 hours a day. Anytime you want to ask him a question, he's ready. And he doesn't ever tell you your questions are stupid. So what this has meant is that now talent can emerge from anywhere. So if you looked at a rating list in, let's say, 1975 or 1978, you would have 9 Soviets and 1 straggler. Now it's 6 different countries. And it's, I think, due to this factor, that chess knowledge, it's partially also explained by the fact that after the Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of Soviet grandmasters emigrated to other countries. That's a partial effect. But too many players are coming out of countries from which no grandmasters emigrated to. So I think computers are. So that's been the kind of evolution. And so once upon a time, we had to gain experience through chess, through playing games and try to, and that was our distinctive signature. You know, my way of doing things is very different from someone else's way of doing things. Now, we all get the same information on the same computer. So very often, you have to work really hard at finding what is it that makes you different from someone else. You have to specialize in something or be good at something. And in fact, for most of the game, it's very difficult to tell who's the stronger player. It's only when the final result comes and you see what made the difference that you can realize, oh, this one is actually better than the other one. So,
We'll take questions from the audience, but one last question. You were the first grandmaster that our country produced. You mentioned that we now have more grandmasters than the number of squares in a chessboard in the book. Where do we, Carlsen has gone on record saying that India is going to be the next chess superpower. What do you attribute this growth to, and where do you see India? I mean, we still don't win an Olympiad. Where do you see India going forward?
Okay, so clearly there's been a kind of chess movement that has picked up steam. A lot of things played into this. First of all, I think when I won the World Junior and became a grandmaster, chess got a lot of attention. So this triggered a few more people to get interested, and some interest in the game started to pick up. I think we're already in generation 2 or 3, where that generation of players is almost retired, and they've started academies, and then they help the next generation along. And so you have now youngsters, and the junior and sub-junior scene is so competitive, and this typical Indian habit, almost like we study for exams. You know, we get into these competitions with gusto, and all the kids are incredibly motivated. And this is not just a movement thing. There's a qualitative leap in skills. I mean, the average level at an Indian tournament, junior tournament, is very, very high. So this is what Carlsen and Kramnik and all refer to this. not only there seems to be a kind of wave, but this wave,
Quality.
yeah, the quality of the wave is just as important.
So the Pragyanandas, the Gukeshes.
Right. I mean,
the
we have
Nihal
4
Sareens.
grandmasters now, currently under the age of 14, and we have so many
IMs.
other IMs, GMs, and all between 14 and 25. So it just shows the sheer depth we have. I think we need to figure out now how to finish it. So in the Olympiad, for instance, you would think that the sheer strength of the bench will produce a medal, but we can only pick a team of 4 or 5. I think if we picked a team of 15, India's chances would keep on rising. But it's a team of 4. And you have a nice choice, but in the end you still have to pick 4, and other countries can field good teams at 4. So slightly annoying for me, China keeps winning gold medals in the Olympics consistently. We have a good 3rd and a 4th, but it would be nice to do better. And obviously, you know, I've been world champion, been world number 1, so that's fine, but I'd be very happy if there were now, we have Hari and Vidit in the top 30.
2700 plus.
Yeah, 2700 plus club. You know, and there's Surya, Sandeepan, Setu, Adiban, all these players are floating around a bit back. So we have a lot of depth. But I think if we can now get more and more people into the 2700s, and eventually the top as well is going to be accessible.
I mean, just to put things in perspective, he's talking of 12-year-olds and 14-year-old grandmasters that we are producing. But he himself is possibly the only player who's 50 plus and still playing competitively at the highest level in the world. Kramnik was age-wise probably closest, but he's officially retired. So it's really a huge achievement that...
By the way, those 4 young grandmasters we have, I think they will pass me this year, or they just did. All 4 of them put together
Age-wise.
will pass me with age-wise.
So that tells you a bit.
So they're all 13 and 50. So
We'll take a few questions from the audience. If you can raise your hands, there'll be some people with the mic. Yeah, the gentleman in front.
Good evening, sir. This is Shumantro. In nowadays, in 2020, if a boy or girl wants to be a good chess player, what will be the most important thing? Is it brain? Is it thinking power? Or is it practice? What do you think about this? Thank you.
I think fundamentally it's practice. Clearly practice augmented or supported by training and coaching is very good, because the 2 things feed off each other. But unless you're playing a lot of games to begin with, there's nothing to coach you for. So playing as many tournaments as you can, and that will probably remain true not only now, even in the future. You can change all the technologies you want, but you won't understand anything as a human being unless you play and practice it. So that's a fundamental thing, and then just if you like it, keep doing more of it. That should be enough.
Yeah.
Hi, good evening, Vishik. My question to you is that chess is a mental game, but you are against your opponent from a very short, at a very short distance. So there is a body language to it also. So what I'm trying to say, Agassi says that he picked up how Boris Baker is going to serve by his body language and his tongue. So were there moments where you picked up that this person is getting upset with my body language, and do people get naughty to put the other person off?
Yes, you can actually pick these up, and you can even pick them up quite often. I don't even know what you pick up, whether you pick it up from the moves or the body language, but you can pick out when your opponent has lost faith in his position because suddenly they're trying to equalize, or you can pick out when someone is nervous. So unfortunately, as you'll find in my book, my nails suffer a lot during tournaments. You can find cues like this, and get some information. It's not 100% reliable, obviously. It's not a science, but it's happened to me more than once that I can sense a blunder coming from my opponent. And I can't explain it, but I can almost sense which blunder it's going to be. Sometimes, okay, there's only one blunder, and it'll happen, and then you think I'm right. So there are a lot of cues like that, and if you're alert, and especially the players who are whom they refer to as killers, the ones, they're the ones who can sense that even your energy levels are dropping. Maybe they're picking it up from the moves, of course, but they can sense that it's happening, and then they increase the trickiness of the position and so on. They're literally searching for the blunder. Sure.
Hi. From what we know is that there are different variations to the chess games. Like there is rapid, there is standard, there is bullet, hyper bullet, Armageddon. So, like I'm sure you've played all these games, and how has been your approach to all these games? Has it been the same or different? And what would you suggest to learners to how to approach these different ways of games? Should they approach differently or in the same way? And I have just one more question. What has been your quickest victorious international game in what time and against which player, and the longest victorious game international against which player? Yeah, thanks.
I've already forgotten the first one. What was the first question? Approaches different formats. Okay. Well, I'm lucky that rapid and blitz chess has always been used. I mean, even 50, 60 years ago, people were playing blitz chess. It's just the concept of playing it as a serious format was not in existence then. But I grew up when rapid chess was just introduced as a proper tournament format. And so I didn't have maybe the resistance to these ideas, because when you're young, you're open to everything. And I think eventually you figure out the difference. Maybe the first thing I realized was rapid chess is not that different from classical chess, because you still have to make good moves. I mean, it's easy to think that because you're playing fast, you can make bad moves and you can confuse your opponent, but eventually my style has coalesced around the idea that the moves still have to be good, or you make the best moves you can. I would say the same for blitz. You can get away with a lot more, so you can take more risks, but there's no justification for playing badly. But I was already in my mid-30s when bullet and all became popular, and so I could never take this seriously. I mean, this thing of 1 minute, playing a whole game in 1 minute, you don't even have time to think, so it's not even clear what skill it's developing. In fact, I once, there's a bullet specialist called Tkachev, and he once very seriously said that you should keep in bullet, you should keep you should keep moving the same piece on nearest to the clock, so that you can press it and press the clock quickly. And there's an online version of this, which is to keep the mouse somewhere. I forget the details, but because online, of course, you don't have to press the clock. So he said online the key is, when the mouse cord gets long, you keep it here and keep clicking the same piece. So I can't take that very seriously, but there are very strong bullet players. So, and Armageddon is the toughest one to get used to, because deep down you can't take it seriously. Deep down there's something tells you this is unfair. I lost this Armageddon game, but it doesn't count. Or I won this Armageddon game, but that was because I was deserving. So you straddle that line and you never get past it. Even now when I lose an Armageddon game, I don't feel upset, because I say, okay, this is ridiculous. So it's very hard to improve at something but the faster the time control, I think the better you must think of psychology. And the slower the time control, the better your moves must be. So in a slow time control, you can't spend too much time waffling about psychology. You keep it in the back of your head. But in the faster time controls, you have to have a good sense of not what is the best move, but what is the move my opponent is most likely to make, and how can I guess that move. So.
Yeah, Sean, you had a question.
What you were saying earlier, now with the progression which has happened, you as a chess player, you are completely conditioned with the strength of the success you have had by your learning experiences, by your understanding of the game. So basically your mind is a conditioned mind based around the experiences of chess which you have had playing right through. So have you reached a stage where you're telling yourself inwardly that I am willing to take a leap and listen to my intuition or do things which I cannot iterate within the limitations of time, or adversely when it's happening in a faster version of the game where, like you were saying, you don't have time to think also. So you're playing instinctively, you're playing something very, without that whole data back of your past experiences. Because why I'm asking this question is because you have younger players or players who aren't having so much of knowledge about the opening or the middle game, and they're playing with their own free will and their own intuition and the power of enjoying the game with their basic understanding. Is it making sense that you can still contribute to the game of chess and play forward, listening to yourself intuitively? Second part is we've got like Fiona Mitsui, who's played chess at some levels without understanding the game herself. We are running a chess academy in Calcutta for street children where they cannot read or write, yet they play incredible chess. So that is again going by the same psyche that they're playing with their own free flow, with their own understanding, with their own, without the data bank of their past experiences. So do you feel, A, that intuitiveness is something which you had reached at some stage where you had to depend on that as a primary call at some stage?
Okay, so that is 50-50. I find that in my case, compared to young players, young strong players, I think their intuition is a bit cleaner because their intuition is composed of a lot of modern ideas, whereas my intuition is all over the place. I have old, outdated ideas in many areas, and I'm also familiarizing with the newer ones. But at the board, sometimes you'll get a strong feeling that some move is good. And do you trust your intuition or not? After a couple of painful defeats where I found that my impression of the position was totally wrong, then in fact the opposite was true, I had to tell myself, well, maybe I have to study these kinds of positions because knowledge keeps growing and the understanding of the game changes and things. So, and I mentioned this in the book as well, that it's as difficult to unlearn as to learn. I mean, that you have a typical idea of a way to do things, and it could well be that it was wrong before, but it was hard for your opponents to know why, and now it's getting easier for your opponents to know why. This happens to be quite often these days. And so, in fact, I hesitate now also when I'm using my intuition because I know that I could just as well easily be completely off the mark. As for them, I think they should follow the intuition because that is the natural way they grow. And if they're playing and it's based on what they're playing, that's the natural way to do it. But if they're studying their games, then they should be open to ideas that they can't see at first.
Is there any youngster with a question? Just a minute. Is there any lady with a question? We've not had 1 minute.
A couple of youngsters, yeah.
That youngster. Yeah, please give him the mic.
Hello. So, who influenced your game when you were young, and whose games did you study during that time?
I was attracted by Tal and Fisher, and amongst the books I got in the Philippines as a prize for solving these puzzles was Karpov's best games. Well, at that time, Spassky's best games, Petrosian's best games. So a lot of these books are also in my collection, and I'm familiar with the material in those books.
And your idol at that time?
I guess I would say Tal. Fisher was still in my mind, but Fisher and Tal, really.
Just
Thank you.
Just talking about Tal, there's a little humorous bit that he's written here. After beating Gelfand in Moscow, they had to go and meet Vladimir Putin the next day. And Vishy writes that when Putin learned that I'd got my early chess lessons at the Tal Chess Club in Madras, he chuckled, "Oh, so you're a problem we brought upon ourselves."
Good evening, Anand.
Yes.
Once upon a time, your assistant was the current world champion, Magnus Carlsen. You must be very familiar with how he played and how he developed as a player. Now he's the world champion, and I understand that his ELO rating has never been achieved by any other player in the history. Having said that, would you think that he's the best ever compared to even Tal, Fischer, Spassky, and all the other legends that you just mentioned?
Okay, I mean, assistant is too strong, but we had a couple of sparring sessions before the Gelfand match, before the Kramnik match and the Topolov match. By the Gelfand match, I think it was looking likely that he would challenge me soon, so the distance was coming between us. And his ELO rating is the highest, he's got the world record. And the next highest mark is already almost close to 40 points behind his. So there's a big gap there. I'm pretty familiar with this thing because I'm competing with him nowadays, and so I have to compete with him a lot.
You just
I think
drew him in Vaikansi.
Yeah, I drew him in Vaikanse. I think.
Last month.
Yeah, I think the last few years he's shown an incredible ability to learn new skills. So in 13 and 14, he was generally seen as someone who avoided theory, whereas the last 2 years it seems like he's someone who aims for theoretical positions. To give you an example, greatest ever I don't like because it is simply impossible to compare apples and oranges. But if you devise any number of objective measures, Carlsen comes on top in a lot of them. And his record looks especially impressive if you see that he does it in all three formats, and he's willing to play a lot of Swiss tournaments, things like that. So, but to be fair to the older champions, even someone like me, I didn't have good Swiss tournaments to play in. So that's a recent development. So again, it's very hard to compare.
We take one more question. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. I wanted to know, like, in the highest level, do you see now the GM starting to have IT teams to train their own reinforcement learning, machine learning models to get an edge over the other GMs? Or do you think it's still too early for those models to be good?
I think we have the software already. And I know that every top player and even not so top player are using that software. Because it's showing so many new ideas that everyone's curious and interested in trying to learn it. I'm not aware of anybody who's been able to get some useful insight from an IT specialist. I mean, in the end, a car is a car. You don't need an auto engineer with you to tell you, it's like that. It's a tool that you use and you use it well. If someone is doing it, they're still doing it in secret. So I'm not aware of that.
I'll take the final question. We've talked about his various world championship wins in classical format. But I think after losing to Carlsen in 2013, you've had your ups and downs, and you've talked about a tournament that you were totally not even planning to play, the 2017 World Championship, Rapid World Championship in Saudi Arabia, where you just went because Aruna told you just go and play. You ended up winning it, and you talked about that. You could understand it's like a Tiger Woods moment when he won after 11 years. You're 50 plus now, you're still competing at the highest level, so is Tiger Woods. Where do you see yourself, do you see yourself playing for more time, for as long as Tiger Woods is playing? or Federer continues? Where do you see yourself?
Yes, but actually when I won Riyadh, it was so unexpected for me. Because first of all, I declined the tournament. And then we had a friend in FIDE who wrote back to us saying, it's a really good tournament. Will you at least consider it? And so eventually I decided, okay, because we had planned a holiday in Kerala with a friend. And suddenly I was going to miss the holiday and just join them for the last day. But anyway, I decided that I would go and try this. And then to my great surprise, I did well in the tournament. The first 2 days, I didn't lose a single game, and I was in the top 5 at least. Shifting around, but top 5. So I was already incredibly happy with that. And then on the last day, I suddenly won a game and shared first place, except the 2 people I expected to share with both lost, Carlsen and someone else, and Wang Hao. And then 2 other guys came and shared first place with me. And I won the tie break and became World Rapid Champion. So that was like a dream event. I think when Tiger won the Masters, it was the same thing.
Against all expectations.
Yes. I mean, it just seemed like, with Rory and Spieth and all, it shouldn't happen now, and it did. So that was a very special moment. But I don't know. I haven't got a firm date when I'm going to stop, but it would be strange to say that I haven't thought about it or something. I mean, I can sort of see that it's going to get harder and harder to go on from now. So I'm kind of
Taking it one step
at a time. I don't plan too much ahead. Certainly this year I'm looking forward to the tournaments I have. I'm trying to plan my calendar. And as long as I enjoy the thing, then that's fine. A Tiger could still play, though I don't really see him play the senior circuit. And I can't see Federer going for the senior circuit either, but who knows? I met Becker in Romania now. He's so happy in the senior circuit. So. Okay, he's also doing a lot of coaching. So.
We hope to get him. He's come and played in Calcutta the last 2 years, and hopefully we'll be able to entice him to come again end of this year. There's several times he mentions in his book there's a great connect with Calcutta. He missed his Grandmaster norm in 1986 narrowly. He talks about playing at Goodrick in 1992. And for 25 years he didn't play in Calcutta. Came and played here in 2018 and 2019. And it's only befitting that so many people have turned out today in Calcutta for this book launch. So on behalf of everyone here at the Tollygunge Club, a big applause for Vishy Anand.
And by the way, my best reception for winning a world championship in 2000 was in Calcutta as well. So.
Was it when our current chief minister was the sports minister or something? I've seen a photograph of yours.
Yeah. So
there's a photograph of a young Mamata Banerjee felicitating him. I think she was sports minister in those days, and he's saying that was one of the best receptions.
And this typical thing where Calcutta is the only city where the journalists know when I'm arriving before I have finalized the flight. So it always happens that before Aruna has decided which flight we're going to take, somebody calls and says, this journalist from the Telegraph is going to be waiting for you because you're coming in this flight. And, some story like that. And that also happens here. My first police escort was here. I think it was in 2000. So I had this, I don't remember if it was there in 91, but in 2000 for sure it was there. Except my car overtook the police escort after 15 minutes, and we were clearing the way for him. But anyway, it's a special city, and I've always enjoyed it, so thank you.
Thank you very much.